The Saints versus the Texans this Sunday, and what's a fun battle between a defense that's forced a ton of interceptions and a rookie quarterback who hasn't thrown one yet. Something's got to give this weekend. Who's going to get the better of this matchup? Let's talk about it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Vogel, and as always, this podcast is brought to you by Scott McNair Injury Lawyers. You've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott McNair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Once again, thank you to Scott McNair Injury Lawyers for being part of the program. Greatly appreciate it as always. So like I said, Saints defense forcing a lot of interceptions this year, already 7 through 5 games. CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback out of Ohio State, has not thrown an interception yet. In fact, he actually broke the record last weekend for the most pass attempts to start an NFL career without an interception, beating out the likes of guys like Tom Brady. And obviously, that name alone is enough to kind of give, meaning to a statistic of that. But CJ Stroud's looked excellent. In fact, CJ Stroud has looked so good that Saints fans should actually be happy about how good he looks, because guess what? Panthers didn't draft him. They took Bryce Young instead. And had Stroud been implemented in Carolina right now, doing exactly what he's doing in Houston, maybe the NFC South standings look a little bit different. So Stroud's been really, outstanding to me. And what stands out is that he doesn't have a loaded, skill position group. Tank Dell's been really fun to watch certain moments. Nico Collins has had his best year so far, but those weren't household names coming into this year. And if you look around, yes, they added a veteran tight end in Dalton Schultz, and he had a nice game against the Falcons this past Sunday. But even guys like Dameon Pierce, who, you expect Dameon Pierce to take that next step, that really hasn't happened yet. So he's really elevating a lot of the guys around him and pretty much going to work with whatever is there. And even if it's not loaded, he's been really impressive. And the Saints are going to have their hands full with a guy like that. Now, they did have some really, really small experience against CJ Stroud in the preseason finale against Houston. Does that put any weight into my prediction for this Sunday? No, I don't really think, seeing one drive of CJ Stroud in late August does anything for the Saints, especially when your coverages are pretty vanilla and you're not going too extreme in the preseason. But it's good to have the familiarity. And if anything, I think the familiarity would come knowing DeMeco Ryans' scheme defensively and how the Saints offense may try to attack that. Not so much what they saw out of Stroud in one preseason game and the Texans offense. But anyway, like I said, you have Stroud who hasn't thrown a pick. He's third in passing yards right now. He's been super, super efficient. And he's going up against the Saints secondary that's done a really, really good job of forcing turnovers, regardless of who they face. It doesn't matter if it's against Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. It doesn't matter if it's against Jordan Love and the Packers. It doesn't matter if it's against Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. And as we saw this past Sunday, it sure as hell doesn't matter if they're facing Mac Jones and the New England Patriots. This is a defense that has done a really good job of going from last year being one of those defenses that in terms of yards is great to this year doing a good job, not just with yards, but doing a good job of taking away the football. And taking away the football is obviously paramount for a Saints team that's really only had one offensive outburst so far this season. And obviously it's through 5 games, and we hope that week 5 was a sign of things to come. But this is going to be one of those games where yet again you kind of say, does your defense rise to the challenge? And I think this is a really interesting matchup. And obviously I know there's going to be so much talk about Stroud not throwing a pick, and I still think he'll probably have moments in this game where he shines. But I would be shocked if Dennis Allen, who we're going to give him credit for one thing, it's being able to coach up really, really good defenses, doesn't have a couple surprises, doesn't have a couple looks to throw CJ Stroud's way that may give the rookie some question marks, that may make him double check before he makes a certain throw. And maybe that forces him to make that mistake. And I think the Saints can do it. And I'll go as far as say I think the Saints are going to be the first team to force an interception out of CJ Stroud. Now, does this equal a win? No, it doesn't equal a win. But I think for the Saints, it is imperative that you make sure you get pressure on CJ Stroud. In the games that he's looked really, really comfortable, man, Texans kept that thing moving. I look at the Steelers game and I look at the Jaguars game. Obviously, those are 2 wins that the Texans have this season. But in those, from start to finish, I saw a quarterback that looked very comfortable, wasn't worried about what was presented his way. And obviously, those are impressive wins. Beating a Jacksonville team that is 3-2, just beat the Bills. And then the Steelers, who are also 3-2, and obviously they're kind of in the same boat with the Saints. Great defense, bad offense. Still an impressive win when you beat a Mike Tomlin-led coach team. So I think for Stroud, getting pressure on him early is going to play a factor. And I think one of the big things is going to be the injury report. Tank Dell concussion protocol does he play? If he misses this game, and there's a legit possibility that is the case, I think that's going to really, really hurt CJ Stroud because that's been a guy who he's trusted a lot on those important plays, those third downs. I go back to the Jacksonville game. It's 3rd and 3. Jacksonville sends a blitz. They're down, I believe, at the time, 10. It was either 7 or 10. Stroud finds Tank Dell open, 3rd and 3, all the way down the field for a long touchdown against the blitz. Really impressive play for me. So Stroud versus defense, who has the edge? I guess I'm going to go Saints defense off experience, but I think it's going to be a fun battle. And I'm actually really excited to see how this plays out. It's going to be a nice little litmus test for a guy like Stroud because even though he's faced some good defenses, in terms of yardage plus turnovers, the Saints are the best defense he's going to face so far. Jags and Colts towards the bottom of the standings in those regards. Falcons and Steelers top half, but not as high as the Saints. So this will be the best defense he faces, and I'm very excited to see what goes down there. Now, before I get into the schedule opening up, I know it's actually second on the rundown. I want to go to Michael Thomas real quick, and then we'll get to the schedule. Michael Thomas has been super efficient this year. I think you make an argument. He's been one of the most consistent receivers in football so far. You know you're getting at least 50 yards a game from him. Would you like to see more? Obviously. But I think that game is coming. And I think that there's a plethora of reasons to feel that way. But let's start with the first one. I think he's building a pretty good connection with Derek Carr. And I think you saw it in the New England game. Carr now, as he's manipulating through the pocket and looking downfield, his eyes seem to be going towards Michael Thomas a little bit more. And I actually think he can do that more than he already does. Rewatching the Patriots game, there were a lot of things I liked. I think Carr actually played a little bit better than I thought he did rewatching it. But I think that he can look at Michael Thomas's direction a little bit more because Mike is getting open constantly. And I think, like I said, we're looking at a player right now who's getting you at least 50 yards, but he's also not getting enough targets at the moment. Like, I think, look, Mike getting 7, 8 targets a game is a healthy dose. I think there's got to be a game in here where he gets his 10 plus targets and he just feasts. And I think that you're looking at a Jacksonville team right now Houston team that has played really, I'd say, solid middle of the road defense. But the one thing I'm noticing is the top playmakers on opposing teams are getting theirs. You know, Drake London and Kyle Pitts for Atlanta got theirs last weekend. Pitts, who hasn't done much this year, 7 for 87. Drake London, on the other hand, 6 for 78. I go back to Jacksonville. Jacksonville didn't play that well against Houston. But Evan Ingram had 7 for 67. Christian Kirk had 4 for 54. The only offense that really struggled to get their guys going against the Houston Texans were the Steelers. And obviously we know there's a big struggle there with Matt Canada in that offense. So I think there's a lot of things going in Michael Thomas's direction. I think Derek Carr is having a really strong connection now with him, starting to trust him more. And now that they're going to use the middle of the field, start to get back to what they're good at, I think that's going to bode well for him. 2, like I mentioned, Houston is letting your top guys make plays. That's good news for Michael Thomas. 3, Chris Olave's injury. Now, Chris Olave is limited in practice. It doesn't seem like he's going to miss this game. But if Chris Olave is compromised to any regard, and maybe there isn't as much trust or as much of an emphasis on getting him involved as there would be if he was at 100%, that would open up the odds for Michael Thomas to have a bigger day. And the 4th thing, it goes down to the targets for me. If he's going to keep getting 8 to 9 targets, and I think that's what he'll probably get against Houston, he's showing, and he showed it against New England, he could get you about 16 yards per reception. And Michael Thomas just had 2 more catches against New England, he would have had over 100 yards. And I think we're just getting so close to that breakout game for him where he just dominates it from start to finish. And the reason I feel that way is I think it would have happened against New England if the Saints didn't say, look, we're up 24-0. The Patriots are not moving the ball. We can kind of put the brakes on and just park the bus and leave it here. Had they not had to park the bus, had they had to go full throttle, pedal to the metal, I think Mike would have gone over 100. And I think that's going to carry over against a Houston defense that is solid but gettable, and that works in MT's favor. So I really like that he's building with Derek Carr. I really like that he is showing that he can be the wide receiver 1 if he has to. And honestly, I'd make an argument he's been their top guy this season. No disrespect to Olave. I think Olave's weaknesses are still there, whereas Mike, his strengths are still very much there, and his strengths are easier to use in a New Orleans offense, that probably should consider playing the way they played against New England. Get the run going, get some easy passes early for Derek Carr, and then got to get Derek Carr to be in that mindset, got to let it rip down the field. He did in the first half, though. There was back-to-back, a drive where he made back-to-back nice throws. One was to Michael Thomas, another one was to Shaheed. Downfield, let it rip. I want to see more of that. And if he's doing that, Mike's going to have his 100-yard game. I feel like it is coming. We're very close to it. But I'd say Mike has his best game of the season. Does it equal 100 yards? Maybe not. Will it be his best game of the season? I feel pretty good about that. I really do. So we'll see how Mike does, but I think that this is really opening up well for him. And I think that the more that he stays healthy, the more games we get into this season, the confidence starts to build. And you can tell when Derek speaks about him, there is a really, really nice connection brewing. It's a matter of time before this thing breaks open in a good direction for the Saints. And I believe that'll be this Sunday against the Texans. So I mentioned I'll get to the schedule opening up, and I want to get into that. I think this Saints schedule, it already looked pretty favorable. I think it's starting to look a little bit more favorable than it already is. Now, that does not equate to wins. Opponent does not equal wins. You got to play your game. I don't care if you're playing the Bears one week or the 49ers the next. You got to play your game. But you also got to play who you play, and you can't blame someone for who they played. You can only face who's on your schedule. And for New Orleans, they're playing some teams that are dealing with injuries right now. Now, I mentioned the Texans. There's a chance that Tank Dell and Laramie Tunsil miss this game. And if Laramie Tunsil and Tank Dell both miss this game, if you take away the left tackle and the go-to target of CJ Stroud, I do think that makes life a little bit tougher on the rookie. And as a result, edge New Orleans. Now, the next week against the Jags, as of now, the Jags are fully healthy. I think that game has potential to be really damn fun, but they'll be at full strength. So the Saints will have their hands full, even if the Jags aren't at full strength, because that's a damn good football team. We saw that in London last week. Following that, Colts, no Anthony Richardson. Now, some people might say, Chris, Gardner Minshew's playing well. He is playing well. And I think Gardner Minshew's a really respectable quarterback. However, the Saints faced Gardner Minshew last year in Philadelphia. He was in for Jalen Hurts, had the shoulder injury, took 2 games off, and the Saints really beat up Gardner Minshew pretty well. You take out one big play to A.J. Brown, Philly's offense was not moving. So I like in this spot against a Gardner Minshew Colts team, I think if you stop the run, you'll have success. Because I think Lattimore will answer the call against a guy like Michael Pittman, who kind of reminds me body type, not play style necessarily, body type, like a Mike Evans. I think that Lattimore will be able to have his, and then it's all about shutting down the run with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. So Colts, no Anthony Richardson. He's got an AC joint sprain grade 3. He's on IR. Then you play the Bears. That's a favorable game regardless. Healthy, not healthy, that's a favorable game. Who do you get after the Bears? You get the Vikings. Now, Vikings would look favorable from their record anyway, but there'd always be the fear of, man, Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, in the 1 o'clock window, they can go off at any time. Now, I know Jettas can go off at any time. That was more so for Kirk. Justin Jefferson's on IR now. He will miss 4 games. The first game he can come back is against New Orleans, and a lot of people are going to say, no brainer, he's coming back against the Saints. That's their luck. I would say not so fast about that. And the reason I would say that is Justin Jefferson does not have a long-term contract extension yet. The Vikings, if they lose this weekend to the Bears, are staring 1-5 in the face with their upcoming game after that being against the 49ers. So most likely 1-6. If you're 1-6 and you're the Vikings and Kirk Cousins is on an expiring contract and you know that you have nice weapons in Justin Jefferson, in Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, maybe I pull the plug on some things and make sure I can get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or any quarterback that they really, really have their eyes on for the next draft. So maybe Jefferson, who's got a hamstring injury right now, misses a little bit more than 4 games for 2 reasons. 1, team might not be trying to win at that time. And 2, more importantly, if I'm Justin Jefferson and I don't have my contract yet, but you know damn well I'm one of the best, if not the best receiver in the league, I don't have to rush back from my hamstring injury, especially if we're 1-5, 1-6, 1-7, whatever the heck the Vikings record could be in 4 weeks' time. So they might get a break and not face Jefferson. And I look at that slate, Texans, Jags, Colts, Bears, Vikings. Talent-wise, Saints can go 4-1 in that stretch. And 4-1 in that stretch would get them to 7-3. And if they were 7-3, they would make the playoffs. Now, you got to go out there and win it. But it goes to show how important starting this Sunday is for the Saints to show that you can go out there and win these gettable games. They did it against the Patriots. That was a gettable game. They went out, they played their asses off, and they did it. Can you do it again? Because if you do it again and you start to show a little bit of consistency, then when you get into these games, even if you drop the Jacksonville game on Thursday night, you can go into Indianapolis and I say, you know what? I like the Saints in this game. Not just because they're better, because they should win this game, because I think they will, and I think they'll answer the call. So games like that matter to me. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it all starts with Sunday in Houston, really good opportunity to get to 4-2. And I think for New Orleans, obviously the defense is going to play factor. Can you slow down CJ Stroud? But Derek Carr's got to answer the call. And Derek Carr's got to play the way he played against New England, maybe a touch better. But I think that's enough because that's complementary football. That's being careful with the football, something the Saints need to do. And I also think, if I go back and look at the Atlanta-Houston game, if Desmond Ridder threw for 300 on Houston's defense and was able to orchestrate a game-winning drive, there's no excuse why Derek Carr can't lead the Saints to victory over the Texans. Again, Texans are no slouch. This is not the old Texans. This is not the walk all over the Texans type squad that we've seen in the past. This is a respectable group by a coach that is damn good at his job, but they got to go out and show me. And Derek Carr has to go out and show me that he can do it back-to-back weeks because we haven't seen it yet in a Saints uniform of back-to-back consistent games. I thought he showed a lot of progress in New England. Give us 250 yards, a touchdown or two, and no turnovers. And win the game, of course, because that's what matters. But we'll see. This is going to be a really interesting opportunity for the Saints. Now, before I wrap things up, there's something that's going on in terms of the Saints world, the interesting news that hasn't been confirmed yet, but there's enough people pointing to it that it seems like it may happen. Saints could bench Trevor Penning. Sounds like a change could be coming to the offensive line. Doesn't necessarily mean it will be Penning. Maybe it means it's Hurst, but it sounds like a change will be made to the left side of the line. Now, if it is Trevor Penning, I think you're playing a dangerous game in terms of his development and whether or not this stunts his growth. But what I will say for the Saints is there is a message to be sent if you're saying we're playing the best players, regardless of draft status or position. There is something to be said that if they play their best offensive line group, whatever that may be, maybe it is Hurst, Pete, Eric McCoy, Ruiz, Ramczyk, maybe that makes the run game a little less predictable because right now they're not running too much on Penning's side. And because of that, you kind of have a good idea of where this offense is going to go to the ball when they run it. And if they're less predictable, that makes things a lot easier for Derek Carr. Also makes things easier for Pete Carmichael, who we know doesn't need to have things harder than they already are. If you could kind of soften the blow and soften the load for him, I think that'd be good. So I think for the Saints, I don't know if I'd love the idea of benching Penning if that is what they decide to do. A lot of rumblings right now. But if they go that route, I would like to see what the line does without him real quick and then make kind of an observation about it. I would not jump to any conclusions. All I would say is I think the Saints have the 1-2 punch in Alvin and Kendrick Miller to be really good on the ground, and then that would make life a lot easier for Derek Carr. And if they got to make changes to the line to do it, so be it. It would just kind of stink if that's where we've ended up with Trevor Penning, where 5 games in, it's like, all right, to the bench for now. It would just kind of stink. But I thought I should address that before I wrap things up. But overall, guys, Saints-Texans this Sunday, I'm going to go with the Saints. I think the Saints are going to win. I'm going to go Saints win 24. I'll go to 17. I think CJ Stroud is going to make enough plays. He's a talented player. I don't know if I love saying Saints scoring 24 because, man, they are just not a prolific offense at all. But I'm going to say that the defense does a good job winning the field position battle, especially if Tank Dell's out and Laramie Tunsil. And I think that the offense showed enough things. And I like that they're talking about using motion and using the tight end room and utilizing the running backs. And that makes me think that, all right, there are some things from Sunday's game against the Patriots that will carry over. Not everything's going to carry over. We got to understand that. We got to be realistic. But I do think some things will carry over, and I'll take the Saints to win. If they don't, it looks a little different. 3-3 going into the Jags game. All of a sudden, I don't know. You might be staring under 500 in the face before you get to late October. You win this game, 4-2. Whatever we thought about going into the Green Bay game, positive thoughts, those are back on the table. And I think that's where this team can get. So I'm going to pick the Saints. I'd love to know what you guys have to think, though. Let me know in the comment section below. Are you taking the Saints or the Texans? Give me your score. Give me your reason why. Maybe your X factor of the game. And I'll get back to you in the comment section. As always, make sure to subscribe to Blue Crew Media's YouTube page and stay tuned for more content in the future from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Hoot